Have you ever observed individuals who possess an almost uncanny ability to influence their surroundings without uttering a single word? They don't resort to shouting or pleading. Instead, they simply withdraw. And yet, the atmosphere shifts. Palpably, a sense of unease settles in, prompting others to question, to pursue, to truly feel. Now, consider applying this principle to your own life. What if you consciously chose to pause before reacting to every stimulus? What if you opted for silence over an immediate response, retreat over an explosive outburst? What transformations might unfold? This very question lies at the heart of the matter. When you cease to be perpetually accessible, emotionally, physically, psychologically, the world around you may experience a jolt, a sense of crisis. This is because those in your orbit have grown accustomed to navigating and, at times, controlling you through your predictable reactions, your ingrained impulses, your consistent availability. However, the moment you decide to step back, to create space, the dynamics fundamentally alter. Those who believed they had you figured out suddenly realize the extent of their misjudgment. As Carl Jung wisely noted, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. Reflect on this profound insight. When you become less reachable, who is it that truly feels the sting of desperation? Who becomes agitated? Who might even attempt to provoke you solely to elicit some flicker of emotion? Their reactions serve as a powerful mirror, revealing far more about their internal landscape than about your own. Crucially, it illuminates the degree to which you may have been unintentionally manipulated through your very responsiveness. You may find yourself habitually extending yourself to please others, to maintain a superficial peace, to avoid the perceived loss of relationships with individuals who, in their essence, were never truly present with you. Each forced yes, every knee-jerk reaction, every surge of emotion freely given, represents a subtle depletion of your vital energy. And at the end of the day, what remains? A gnawing tiredness, a simmering frustration, an inexplicable emptiness. But let me tell you the underlying reason for this depletion. It stems from being excessively available to those who don't warrant even a fleeting moment of your precious silence. This discourse is not an advocacy for turning your back on humanity. Rather, it is an invitation to consciously choose yourself, to embark on a journey of self-discovery and wholeness. It is about embracing what Jung termed individuation, the profound process of becoming a complete, authentic, and integrated being. This transformative journey commences with the realization that silence can wield a power far exceeding that of 1,000 impassioned arguments. Withdrawal, when it originates from a place of mindful awareness rather than escapism, becomes a potent act of self-assertion. Therefore, I pose this question to you directly, looking you in the eye. For how much longer will you permit the emotions of others to dictate your responses? How long will you react like a marionette, twitching with every tug on your emotional strings? Perhaps the time has come to sever those ties, to intentionally withdraw, to cultivate an aura of healthy mystery around yourself, because when you cease to be readily available, the entire landscape shifts. You have been conditioned, perhaps, from your earliest years to always be present, to respond swiftly, to prioritize pleasing others, to utter yes even when your inner voice screams no. You may have been subtly led to believe that your worth is intrinsically linked to your accessibility to others. But here is a profound truth, one that may not have been articulated to you with such clarity before. This excessive availability is not a virtue to be lauded. It is, in fact, a subtle form of self-imprisonment. As long as you cling to the notion that you must be constantly reachable, whether emotionally or otherwise, you will remain susceptible to manipulation, perpetually drained and ultimately relegated to the background once your immediate utility diminishes. Do you understand why this occurs? Because unwavering availability breeds predictability, and anything predictable risks becoming a mere tool in the hands of others. People may begin to perceive you as an emotional emergency button, pressing it, when they seek attention, solace, or validation, only to then place you back on the shelf until their next perceived need arises. This dynamic can remain veiled because you might be ensnared in the illusion that being present for everyone will somehow guarantee their reciprocal presence in your life. Sadly, this is rarely the case. Carl Jung spoke eloquently about the persona, that carefully constructed mask we wear in our attempts to gain acceptance, love, and recognition. It is precisely this mask, often meticulously crafted for external validation, that compels us towards this state of over-availability. You might habitually utter, "It's okay," even when you feel suffocated by the demands placed upon you. You might reflexively respond to messages with lightning speed, even when utterly depleted. You might find yourself endlessly explaining, justifying, and defending your actions as if you owe some fundamental explanation to the entire world. But the stark reality is this: the more you position yourself as a central figure on the stages of others' lives, the more you fade into the periphery of your own. Constant availability is a subtle yet insidious form of self-abandonment, a disguised attempt to solicit approval, evade rejection, and exert control over the image others hold of you. However, this perceived control comes at a significant cost: the erosion of your inner peace. Your vital energy, a finite and precious resource, becomes dispersed as if it were an inexhaustible wellspring. Those who demand your constant availability, in truth, do not necessarily desire you in your entirety. Rather, they seek what you provide: validation, companionship, distraction, emotional comfort. But when you initiate a shift, when you establish a boundary, when you consciously choose not to react to their familiar cues, these same individuals may become agitated, level accusations against you, even label you as weird or different. This shift in their perception is not a reflection of any inherent flaw in your newfound self-assertion. Instead, it signifies that you have ceased to function in the specific way they had grown accustomed to, the way that conveniently served their needs. And here lies a particularly poignant truth: the more readily available you are, the less value others tend to assign to you. What is perceived as overly abundant can easily become an emotional doormat, something taken for granted. Respect is rarely extended towards that which requires no effort to obtain. Value is seldom placed upon that which is perpetually present. Therefore, I urge you to pause and engage in honest introspection. Who truly warrants your invaluable time? Who genuinely deserves your focused attention, your authentic presence, your empathetic listening, or perhaps more importantly, who deserves your considered absence? But before you can definitively answer these crucial questions, it is imperative to grasp a fundamental concept. Why do we react so readily? What fuels this almost automatic inclination to respond, to justify, to relentlessly please? The answer, according to Carl Jung, lies within what he termed psychic energy, and this vital force will be the focus of our exploration in the subsequent discussion. For your energy is your most fundamental resource, and if you fail to safeguard it, others will undoubtedly seek to exploit it. If these insights resonate with you, I encourage you to engage further by subscribing to this channel. Thank you for your continued support. Carl Jung did not envision the human psyche as a mere automaton, blindly reacting to external stimuli without consequence. Instead, he posited that our minds function as intricate energy systems, where every thought, emotion, and action draws upon and consumes a portion of this finite energy. The critical question then becomes, are you consciously directing the flow of your psychic energy, or are you passively allowing the external world to dictate its expenditure? Every impulsive reaction represents a dissipation of this precious psychic energy. When you feel compelled to defend yourself against criticism that warrants no acknowledgement, when you rise to the bait of provocation simply to assert your perceived correctness, when you become entangled in unproductive arguments, when you strive to please those who demonstrably fail to value you, you are essentially squandering your inner strength on endeavors that offer no genuine nourishment to your soul. And Jung was unequivocally clear on this point: that which you resist persists. The more you react, the more tightly you bind yourself to the very dynamics you seek to escape. Individuals who consistently feel emotionally drained are not inherently weak. Rather, their energy is often misdirected, scattered across unproductive engagements. And what befalls someone living in a state of perpetual exhaustion? They become increasingly vulnerable, and vulnerability in turn renders you easy prey. Manipulative, opportunistic, and emotionally needy individuals possess an uncanny ability to sense this energetic depletion. They readily perceive that you lack the skills to effectively guard your energetic boundaries, that you react to virtually everything, that you seem perpetually engaged in trying to fix the world around you, and they will not hesitate to exploit this perceived weakness. Jung astutely observed that a healthy psyche is one that possesses the capacity to contain and manage its internal energy. This entails knowing how to assert a firm no without succumbing to guilt, how to maintain a thoughtful silence without feeling cowardly, and how to observe and discern before impulsively acting. True power does not reside in reflexive reaction. It lies in the conscious and deliberate choice of when and how to engage, and this level of conscious choice is only attainable when you possess a deep and nuanced understanding of your own internal landscape, enabling you to recognize your ingrained impulses. How many sleepless nights have you endured replaying unresolved conversations in your mind? How many precious hours have you spent ruminating on what you should have said or attempting to decipher the motivations behind someone's unkind treatment? This is psychic energy being relentlessly drained, offering no return on your emotional investment. You are, in essence, keeping alive the ghosts of past interactions that should have long since faded into oblivion, and perpetuating dysfunctional dynamics that persist solely because you continue to engage and react. Psychic energy functions much like an invisible force field. When diligently guarded and consciously directed, it radiates a palpable presence. You can enter a room and command a certain level of respect without uttering a single syllable. However, when this energy is poorly managed and carelessly expended, you become increasingly invisible, perpetually reactive, and emotionally fragile. And the world, in its often unforgiving nature, tends to show little mercy towards those who readily yield their energetic resources. Therefore, it is crucial to begin observing your own emotional triggers with heightened awareness. What are the specific situations or interactions that consistently provoke an automatic reaction within you? What causes you to lose your inner equilibrium? These very points of vulnerability are the precise junctures where your precious energy leaks away. And it is precisely in these areas that focused self-work is required, not to cultivate coldness or indifference, but to develop a discerning selectivity, to become the sovereign ruler of your own energetic domain. And here emerges one of Jung's most profound revelations. When you consciously conserve your psychic energy, you disrupt the projections that others habitually cast upon you. And this can be deeply unsettling for them, as it ventures into the often unacknowledged territory of silent manipulation. In our subsequent exploration, we will delve into the ways in which opportunistic individuals subtly feed off your readily available energy, and why your conscious unavailability can completely disarm these manipulative games. Prepare to truly see the dynamics at play with those who may have been subtly draining you without your conscious awareness. You may believe you are in control of your responses, that your emotional reactions are deliberate choices, but the underlying truth can be far more nuanced, even unsettling. Many of your emotional responses are, in fact, deeply ingrained patterns, and those who possess an intuitive understanding of these patterns can manipulate you with surprising ease. Opportunistic individuals often don't need to resort to raised voices, overt threats, or forceful tactics. They simply learn to trigger the emotional buttons you have left exposed, and you react predictably, time and time again. Carl Jung termed this phenomenon projection, the psychological mechanism through which individuals unconsciously attribute aspects of themselves, often the unacknowledged or undesirable parts, onto others. But there is another, less frequently observed dimension to this dynamic. While others project their inner landscapes onto you, you also become the unwitting receptacle for these projected images. And the more emotionally available you are, the more you become a blank canvas onto which these projections can be readily painted. Consider that friend who only seems to reach out during times of personal crisis, that partner who consistently relies on you to be the rescuer, that acquaintance who showers you with praise, but only as long as you remain useful to their agenda. These patterns are rarely coincidental. These individuals are not truly relating to the authentic you. Rather, they are interacting with their idea of you, with the specific role you have implicitly or explicitly agreed to play in their lives. And why do you often agree to these roles? It often stems from a deep-seated fear, the fear of disappointing others, the fear of not being loved, the fear of being ultimately abandoned. The most insidious forms of manipulation rarely involve overt aggression or shouting matches. Instead, they often operate in the quiet undercurrents of guilt. You begin to feel an unspoken obligation to the other person, a belief that you need to be constantly available, perpetually helpful, endlessly understanding, even when these demands chip away at your own well-being. And here lies a pivotal insight. The manipulator doesn't necessarily need to overtly control your actions. They simply need you to continue reacting in the same predictable ways. But the moment you disrupt this pattern, the moment you cease to react as expected, the entire dynamic begins to unravel. When you start to assert boundaries by saying no, by responding with thoughtful silence, by choosing to withdraw rather than immediately offering explanations, the carefully constructed projections begin to crumble. The mask they have subconsciously placed upon you starts to fall away. This shift can leave others feeling profoundly unsettled because they no longer know how to categorize or interact with the new you. And perhaps more significantly, they are now forced to confront their own internal landscapes, a confrontation for which not everyone is prepared. Your conscious unavailability becomes a perceived threat because it compels others to confront their own underlying emptiness or insecurities. The deliberate silence you offer can amplify the internal noise they desperately seek to avoid. And it is often at this juncture that the counterattack may commence: criticism, emotional drama, attempts to re-engage you in the old patterns. This is not necessarily because you are wrong in your newfound self-assertion. Rather, it is because you have ceased to function as a convenient mirror, reflecting back to them an image that reinforces their own sense of equilibrium. However, dysfunctional. Jung wisely stated, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." When you withdraw, when you stop feeding the old cycles of reactivity, the shadow aspects of others begin to emerge more clearly. And this can be deeply unsettling for those who have habitually used you as a form of emotional escape. But what about you in all of this? Are you prepared to navigate the inherent discomfort of being misunderstood, potentially rejected, or even directly attacked for the act of protecting your own energetic boundaries? Are you willing to endure the initial silence that may follow these ruptures? Because it is precisely within that space of quietude that a new and authentic form of personal power begins to take root. And this is the territory we will explore. Next, in the subsequent part of our discussion, you will gain a deeper understanding of why silence can be the most profoundly disruptive force within the human psyche, and how it can fundamentally alter the dynamic between you and the world around you. The modern world often feels relentlessly noisy, a cacophony of voices vying for attention, demanding immediate responses, and engaging in often pointless debates to assert their viewpoints, even at the expense of their own inner peace. Yet, there exists a potent force that remains largely unrecognized and even less frequently mastered: the power of conscious silence. This is not the silence of passivity or cowardice, but rather a deliberate, strategic, and brutally lucid choice. It is a silence that is not merely an absence of sound, but an amplified presence, a potent form of communication in itself. Jung viewed silence not as a void, but as fertile ground for profound inner transformation. When you consciously choose to cease reacting impulsively, you create the space to truly observe, and through this focused observation, you begin to discern patterns that previously remained hidden from your awareness: recurring emotional cycles, subtle manipulation, tactics, and ingrained patterns of self-sabotage. Silence fosters lucidity, and lucidity can be deeply unsettling for those who thrive on maintaining control through your predictable reactions. Have you ever noticed how some individuals seem to panic when you don't immediately respond, when you refrain from offering explanations, when you simply create space and perhaps temporarily withdraw? It's often not because they genuinely miss you in your authentic being. Rather, it is because your silence disrupts their carefully constructed narrative of the interaction and their perceived control within it. As long as you engage verbally, you remain within the familiar rules of their game. But when you become silent, you fundamentally alter those rules, creating an imbalance for anyone who thrives on your predictable responses. True silence is not merely the absence of vocalization. It is the embodiment of mastery over one's own internal energy. It is the conscious refusal to be dragged down into the emotional turbulence of others. It is the deliberate choice not to engage in battles that offer no genuine value or nourishment. Jung posited that individuation, the profound process of becoming one's true self, necessitates this kind of intentional distancing. Only in the stillness of silence can you truly listen to the quiet wisdom of your own inner voice, unburdened by the incessant interference of the external world. However, let us not be naive. This conscious embrace of silence carries its own inherent cost. It may create distance between you and those who primarily valued you for the specific roles you played in their lives. It may render you incomprehensible, to those who could only perceive you through the lens of their own projections. You might even be labeled as cold, distant, or arrogant by those who resist this shift in your energetic boundaries. But all of these external reactions are ultimately reflections of those who never truly sought to engage with your depth, only with your perceived utility. And here lies a challenging truth. The more you mature and deepen your self-awareness, the more selective you naturally become with your words. This is because you begin to understand that each spoken sentence represents an energetic investment, and not everyone warrants access to the precious currency of your truth. Sometimes silence is not an act of retreat, it is an assertion of sovereignty. It is the unspoken language of those who no longer feel the need to constantly prove their worth or justify their existence to anyone. Silence can be inherently uncomfortable for others because it compels them to confront their own internal thoughts, their own underlying anxieties, their own internal noise. And this discomfort often reveals far more about their inner state than any articulate argument you could offer. You do not need to endlessly explain your need for space or your chosen silence. Your absence and your quietude speak volumes in themselves. And those who feel threatened by this shift in your availability often reveal the extent to which they depended on your previous imbalance to maintain their own sense of control. But perhaps the most profound power of silence lies not in its ability to disrupt external dynamics, but in its capacity to reconstruct you from within. It is a silence that fosters a deep connection to something far beyond the fleeting validation of external approval. It is within this internal sanctuary, free from the relentless demands of others, that you begin